I always thought betrayal came with warning signs: a missed dinner, a lie caught too easily, a lipstick mark on a collar, or a late-night call that ended too quickly. But when betrayal finally reached me, it wasn't with fireworks. It was with silence. I had just come home from a long day at the clinic. Working as a physical therapist in suburban Illinois didn't exactly bring fame or riches, but it gave me purpose. My wife, Cassandra, used to say that my patients adored me because I made them feel whole again. That meant something. At least, it used to. That night I came home earlier than usual. I had planned to surprise her with takeout from her favorite Thai place. She'd been distant lately, and I thought maybe a cozy dinner could bring us closer again. Our home still smelled faintly of lavender oil. Cassandra's obsession with scented diffusers hadn't changed, but the air felt off. I was about to call out her name when I heard her voice from the study. Not raised, not frantic, just calm, cold, too calm. I stopped, hidden by the hallway, frozen mid-step. I should have kept walking, should have let her finish her call and pretended I'd never heard it, but I didn't. "I just can't keep doing this," she said. "He's so safe, predictable. He'll never leave me, and that's the problem. I feel like I'm drowning in his kindness." Her words cut cleaner than any scalpel ever could. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself, heart racing. She was talking to someone, no, confiding, and it was about me. "I know it sounds cruel, but I haven't been in love with him in years," she continued. "I think I stayed because it was easier. He worships the ground I walk on. But that's not love. It's suffocation." My mind screamed at me to barge in, to shout, to confront her. But my body was stuck in place like some coward eavesdropping on the dissection of his own life. I couldn't stop listening. A pause. "I've been seeing someone," she said next, barely above a whisper. "It wasn't planned. It just happened. With someone who sees me. It just happened. That's how a decade of marriage ended. With 3 careless words." I stepped back slowly, clutching the takeout bag like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I didn't want to cry. I wanted to throw something, scream, beg the universe to rewind 10 minutes so I could still be the husband who didn't know. But the truth had already broken in. I turned, walked into the kitchen, placed the food down on the counter like a ghost. Then I went upstairs into the guest bedroom, the one we never used, the one I now realized she hadn't touched in months. Maybe that's where he had been. The man who sees her. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't eat. I didn't even confront her. When she emerged from the study, her face relaxed, glowing even. I just sat on the couch like I hadn't heard a thing. She kissed me on the cheek, told me she was tired, and went upstairs. As if our world hadn't just shattered, as if she hadn't just admitted that she never loved me. And I, fool that I was, sat there, staring at the empty living room, wondering when I had stopped being enough. I didn't leave that night. I couldn't. Something inside me, some pathetic ember of hope or fear, kept me tethered to that house. I paced the hardwood floors like a man waiting for a verdict. I listened to Cassandra moving about upstairs, closet doors opening, her shower running, the soft thud of her footsteps. It was routine, familiar, almost enough to make me believe nothing had changed, except everything had. I had changed. I just didn't know who I was becoming yet. When I finally drifted into an uneasy sleep on the couch, I dreamt of silence. The kind that chokes you, not with peace, but with absence. In the dream, Cassandra stood across the room with her back turned to me, talking to a man whose face I couldn't see. When I called her name, she didn't turn around. When I reached out, my hand passed through her like smoke. That's what I had become, something she no longer even needed to acknowledge. I woke up before dawn, the sun just a faint suggestion behind the curtains. My throat was dry, my body stiff. Cassandra was still asleep upstairs. I didn't know how I knew that, I just did. The way you can feel the weight of someone else's breath in the air even if they're not in the same room. And then I did something I had never done before. I left. No note, no confrontation, no dramatic goodbye. I grabbed the gym bag I kept in the hall closet, stuffed it with clothes, my toothbrush, charger, the essentials. Then I stepped outside into the chill of early morning. I stood on the porch for a moment, breathing in the quiet. This was the house I had poured my soul into, the deck I built with my own hands, the flowers I had planted because Cassandra said she liked the color, the lights I had strung up for our anniversary last year. Everything around me had been touched by love, by effort, by me. But now it all felt like a museum of delusion. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I was past that. I was numb. I drove with no destination in mind, the suburban streets blurring into fields, then highways, then unfamiliar towns. The sky slowly shifted from dark blue to pink to gold. I had nowhere to go, but the act of leaving felt like freedom, like breath, like escape. Hours later, I ended up in a town I couldn't name, at a motel that charged by the week and didn't ask questions. The room smelled like old carpet and Lysol. The bed sagged. The TV didn't work unless you hit it on the side. It was perfect. I turned off my phone, not because I was afraid Cassandra would call. She wouldn't. She was probably too busy pretending everything was fine, too absorbed in her double life to notice I was gone. No, I turned it off because I couldn't bear the texts from friends or family asking, "Everything okay?" What could I say? That my marriage had been a lie and I'd been too blind to see it. I spent 2 days there, 2 days of doing absolutely nothing. I stared at the ceiling, the walls, the flickering motel sign outside the window. I thought about the man Cassandra had mentioned, the one who saw her. I imagined him young, maybe charming. Probably someone from her yoga class or the art gallery she started volunteering at last spring. I wondered what it felt like for her, to be desired again, to feel chosen. I hadn't felt chosen in years. But then something shifted. On the 3rd morning, I woke up and realized I wasn't dead, not emotionally, not spiritually. I was heartbroken, yes, but still breathing, still moving, still capable of feeling, and that made me dangerous, because now I had nothing left to lose. I went for a walk that morning. It was cold, my breath visible in the air, but I welcomed it. The town was quiet, too early for most shops to open, but the diner was lit up and humming. I stepped inside and sat in the far corner. An older waitress came by with a coffee pot, gave me a knowing look, and poured a cup without asking. "Tough week?" she asked. I smiled bitterly. Something like that. She didn't pry, just nodded and walked off. That silence felt kinder than any words. While I sipped my coffee, I pulled out my notebook. I hadn't written in months, years maybe, but now the words poured out of me like floodwater. Anger, confusion, pain, but also clarity. For the first time, I wasn't writing to impress Cassandra or anyone else. I was writing for me. I wrote about the night I heard her voice crack open my world. About the silence between us that had stretched so far, I hadn't even realized I was alone. About the realization that sometimes the person you love most isn't the person who will love you back. And I made a vow to myself, right there in that cracked vinyl booth with the stale coffee and the hum of a broken jukebox behind me. I will not let this define me. I didn't know what came next. I had no plan, no grand vision. But I knew I couldn't go back, not to the house, not to the man I was. That version of me died the moment I heard Cassandra say she was suffocating. This, whatever this was the beginning of something else, something real. I didn't realize how much of myself I had lost until I was completely alone. It started with the little things, the way I hesitated before ordering breakfast, unsure of what I actually liked anymore. The way I automatically reached for my phone to send Cassandra a text, then stopped, realizing there was no one on the other end who cared whether I had eggs or pancakes, or anything really. For so long my identity had been wrapped in hers, in our life, in the man I thought I had to be to keep her happy. It wasn't just about being a husband, it was about being the right kind of husband. The one who remembered anniversaries without a reminder, who brought home flowers without needing an occasion, who offered a steady paycheck, who fixed the leaky faucet without complaint, who smiled through dinner even when he was exhausted. The husband who became invisible, not because he wanted to, but because invisibility was the cost of stability. I thought love meant proving yourself every day, but maybe real love doesn't require constant proof. Maybe it just is. That thought haunted me as I walked the small streets of this sleepy town. I passed hardware stores, antique shops, a faded bookstore with a dusty closed sign hanging perpetually in the window. It was all quaint in a way that hurt, like staring at a life that had no idea what betrayal looked like. Everywhere I went, I felt like a ghost, not quite seen, not quite gone. I wandered into a park at the edge of town, a place with benches that faced a slow-moving river. The air was cool and clean. A few kids played nearby, laughing in a way that made my chest ache. I sat down, watched the water, and for the first time in years I tried to remember who I was before Cassandra, before I had shaped my personality around being her anchor, her audience, her safety net. I used to write poetry. Not good poetry, mind you, but raw, ugly, honest lines that made sense only to me. I used to dream of teaching literature, not pushing marketing analytics for a software firm. I used to laugh more. I used to believe I was worthy of being loved as I was. But somewhere along the way, that version of me had vanished, eroded under the daily grind of giving, adjusting, compromising. I had been too busy holding up our marriage to notice I had let go of myself. Sitting on that bench, something inside me snapped. Not in anger, not even in grief, but in surrender. I was done apologizing for existing. Cassandra didn't leave because I was a bad man. She left because I stopped fitting into the story she wanted to tell herself. A new man had entered the narrative, someone who offered excitement, maybe chaos, maybe just difference, and in comparison, I had become beige wallpaper, familiar, predictable, silent. But predictable doesn't mean useless, and silence doesn't mean weakness. I pulled out my phone, not to call her, not to check messages, just to open a note app and begin writing. The day I disappeared wasn't the day I stopped existing. It was the day I remembered I was real. Those were the first words I had written about myself in years. Not a budget proposal, not an anniversary card, just me, writing as me. The next hour passed in a blur. Words spilled out. Thoughts that had no place in my marriage because they were inconvenient or emotional or unproductive. I wrote about how I felt invisible, standing next to Cassandra at parties. How she never asked about my dreams. How sex became a transaction, routine, devoid of passion, like checking off a box. I wasn't angry. I was awake. I hadn't been awake in years. The sun was beginning to set when I finally looked up. The river glowed orange in the fading light. A teenage couple passed by, hand in hand, and I watched them with a strange mix of admiration and mourning. I hoped they never had to hear someone they love say, "I haven't loved you in years." That sentence had carved a scar into my soul, one I would carry forever. And yet, I realize now, it had also freed me. By the time I returned to the motel, I felt lighter, still wounded, but not bleeding. I microwaved a frozen dinner, sat on the edge of the bed, and watched the old TV flicker with some dated crime show. I didn't care what was on. I just needed noise that wasn't the echo of my own mind. Then, just as I was about to shut it off and crawl under the covers, my phone lit up again. Meredith, I hadn't expected her to call. Not that night. Not ever, maybe. But I answered without thinking. "Ben?" Her voice was soft, careful, like she wasn't sure if I'd scream or cry. "Yes." I don't know where you are, but I just wanted you to know I didn't mean for it to come out that way." I closed my eyes. "But you meant it." A pause. "I don't know what I meant anymore." I sighed. "That's the problem, Meredith. You've never known." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I believe you," I said. And I did. I believed she was sorry, not for the betrayal, but for how messy it had all become. She asked where I was. I told her I wasn't ready to come home. She didn't argue. She just said, "Okay," and the line went dead. And somehow that goodbye felt more honest than any I'd ever heard. The motel room was silent, except for the low hum of the air conditioner and the occasional distant bark of a dog. I sat at the edge of the bed, still dressed in the same shirt from the night before, my fingers hovering over my phone screen. There were no new messages from Cassandra, and part of me was surprised, but another part was relieved. Silence, in its own cruel way, can be a gift. I hadn't told anyone where I was. Not my co-workers, not my parents, not even Nathan, my best friend since college. I wasn't ready to explain. Hell, I wasn't ready to listen either. I just needed space, not for reflection, but for survival. But that morning, survival was beginning to feel suspiciously like stalling. I stood and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. My eyes were bloodshot, my beard patchy from uneven growth, my expression a hollow shell of a man who had given more than he received. I splashed water on my face, let it drip from my chin, and stared at the version of me that had tolerated too much for too long. I needed a plan. I needed purpose. So I did the most human thing I could think of. I got in my car and drove. Not far, just far enough to feel motion again. A gas station, then a coffee shop, then a small bookstore tucked between a pharmacy and a florist. I didn't buy anything. I just wandered, touched the worn spines of novels I used to love. Hemingway, Baldwin, Steinbeck, authors who said the hard things out loud. Words I had forgotten how to speak. And then it happened. The knock. I had just returned to my motel room, a lukewarm cup of coffee in hand when I heard it. 3 soft raps, not frantic, not forceful, just unexpected. My heart skipped. I hesitated. No one knew I was here. I opened the door, and there stood Nathan, tall, unshaven, wearing that same faded hoodie he always wore when something was wrong. "Thought I might find you here," he said. I blinked. "How?" "You always disappear when shit hits the fan. Last time you ended up in Tahoe." He shrugged. "You like water, motels, diner coffee, predictable patterns. It's part of your charm." A lump formed in my throat. "Cassandra told you?" I asked. "She called me yesterday," he replied. "Said you were gone, said she was confused, upset. She didn't tell me what happened." I stepped aside, let him in. The room suddenly felt too small for both of us. Nathan sat on the bed. "You gonna tell me, or should I start guessing?" I sat across from him, on the chair near the small table. I didn't speak right away. Then quietly, I said it. "She doesn't love me. Hasn't in years." Nathan's eyes dropped. He exhaled slowly. "Damn." I nodded. She said I was comfortable, predictable, boring. Said she felt trapped. I heard it all. She didn't know I was home. Silence stretched between us. Then, softly, Nathan said, "You deserved better than that." It was the first time I'd heard someone say it out loud. I didn't know I needed it until that very moment. "Thanks," I whispered. He reached into his coat and pulled out a flask. "Still too early for whiskey?" "Probably." He shrugged and unscrewed the cap anyway. Took a sip, passed it to me. We sat there for a while, sharing cheap whiskey in silence. Not every friendship needs words. Sometimes presence is enough. But eventually Nathan spoke again. "What now?" I shook my head. "I don't know. I don't even know who I am anymore. I spent 10 years trying to be the man she needed. I don't think I ever stopped to ask if I was the man I wanted to be." Nathan looked at me hard. "Then maybe it's time to find out." And just like that, the idea planted itself. I didn't have to go back. I didn't have to fix something she never wanted to fix. I could choose myself for the first time in a decade. As night fell, Nathan left. But before he did, he turned at the door and said, "No matter what, you're not alone in this. Remember that." And with that, the room felt just a little less empty. I had always believed that I knew who I was. A dependable husband, a quiet achiever, a man who didn't need much to feel content. But the past few weeks had stripped that identity down to its bones, and now I stood at the edge of something unfamiliar. The opportunity to reinvent. Lucas S. Place wasn't anything fancy, just a small 2-bedroom house nestled in a wooded neighborhood outside Asheville. But there was peace in the silence, in the rustling trees, in the absence of judgment. He didn't ask me to talk, and I didn't offer much, but his presence was a steady current beneath my chaos. I started waking up before sunrise, something I never used to do. I'd pour a mug of black coffee and sit on the porch, watching the fog roll in over the trees, like a quiet wave swallowing the world. It gave me space to think, or not think, when thinking hurt too much. One morning, Lucas stepped outside with a second mug and handed it to me. "You sleep at all?" he asked. I shook my head. Some. Dreams make it worse. He didn't push. Just nodded, took a sip, and stared out at the trees with me. I signed up for the gym, I said quietly. Lucas raised an eyebrow. Look at you trying to lift your way out of heartbreak. I smirked, the first real smile in days. Something like that. It wasn't about fitness, not really. It was about doing something that belonged to me. About sweating the grief out of my bones, one rep at a time. I started journaling too. Just messy, scrawled pages about Meredith, about myself, about the anger that no longer burned, but simmered quietly like coals under ash. The pain wasn't sharp anymore. It was something duller now, like a bruise I pressed on sometimes, just to make sure I could still feel. A week after arriving, I found myself walking into a local bookstore. No plan. Just drawn in by the warm lights and the smell of pages and ink. I wandered the aisles until a title caught my eye. Rebuilding Yourself When the Old You Falls Apart. It sounded cheesy, but I bought it anyway. The woman at the register had kind eyes, maybe early 40s. She scanned the book and glanced up. Rough week? I gave a tired laugh. More like a rough decade. She didn't ask for details, just nodded and handed me the book. You're still here, that's something. Later that night I read the first chapter and underlined a line that stuck with me. Before you can rebuild, you have to grieve the man you used to be. And God was I grieving. I grieved the version of me that believed love was enough. I grieved the man who made coffee for a woman who hadn't loved him in years. I grieved the husband who thought being steady was the same as being seen. Lucas watched me go through all this without commentary. He simply handed me beers when I needed them, and space when I didn't. One night we sat out by a fire pit behind his house, the night crickets singing like a broken choir. "Do you ever think about dating again?" he asked casually. I let out a low chuckle. I can't even look at a wedding photo without getting nauseous. He grinned. That bad, huh? I nodded. Worse. But then I paused. I do wonder what kind of man I'd be with someone new. Lucas tilted his head. What do you mean? I mean I've only ever been husband Tobias, the reliable one, the quiet one. I want to know who I am when I am not orbiting someone else's needs. Lucas tapped his beer bottle against mine, then go find out. And just like that, something settled inside me. I didn't need to be anyone's anything, not now. I just needed to find the man I hadn't met yet, the man I could finally become. It had been nearly 3 weeks since I left. Enough time for the numbness to dull, for the nights to become less suffocating. Enough time to almost start believing that the worst was behind me. Until she showed up. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind where the sky is too blue and the breeze too gentle, and you almost forget that pain can still live inside you. Lucas was out grabbing groceries. I was in the garage, tuning up the old mountain bike I'd found buried under a tarp, trying to fix something mechanical because I couldn't fix the emotional. Then I heard it. 3 knocks on the front door. I wiped the grease from my hands, heart already pounding. Something in me knew it wasn't a delivery man, knew it wasn't a neighbor. When I opened the door, I didn't need to ask. Meredith stood there. She looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but emotionally. Her shoulders curled inward. Her eyes didn't sparkle like they used to, not even in the manipulative way I'd come to recognize. She looked human, fallible, and for the first time I wasn't overwhelmed with love or rage. I was just tired. "Tobias," she said, voice trembling. I didn't answer, just leaned against the doorframe and waited. "I've been trying to give you space," she continued. "But I couldn't. I had to see you." I sighed, stepping outside and closing the door behind me. "You've seen me. Now what?" Meredith flinched. She wasn't used to this version of me. Short, guarded, unapologetic. "I've been seeing a therapist," she said quickly, like she was trying to offer proof of redemption. "I've been trying to understand why I said what I said, why I let things get so far." I didn't respond. Part of me wanted to scoff, the other part, shamefully, wanted to listen. She took a step closer. "You didn't deserve what I said, or how I made you feel. I see that now." "I'm glad," I said, voice flat. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness," she continued, though I could tell she was lying. I needed to face you. I needed to say it out loud. What exactly are you saying, Meredith? I asked. She looked down, fiddling with the zipper on her jacket. That I miss you. That I hate what I did. That maybe there's still something left. My jaw clenched. I looked at the woman I had once given my world to, and now she was just someone standing on a stranger's porch. There's nothing left, I said quietly but firmly. Not for me. Her face crumpled. You won't even consider— No, I cut her off, because while you were busy deciding you were tired of me, I was busy loving you. While you were looking for a way out, I was trying to find ways to fix us. You said I was predictable? Dull? That I didn't make you feel alive? I paused, breathing deeply. Do you know what's worse than being unloved, Meredith? It's being tolerated. She swallowed hard. I know. No, you don't, I said, stepping closer, because if you did, you wouldn't be here asking for pieces of a man you broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks now, but it didn't move me like it used to. I'd spent too many years bending backwards to comfort her. Now I stood tall. I don't hate you, I added, but I can't let you back in. That door closed the night you forgot I was listening. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out, so I turned, walked back inside, closed the door. And I didn't look back. It was only then, heart still thudding, that I realized something. Closure doesn't always come in soft words or mutual understanding. Sometimes closure is a door you close yourself, from the inside. I didn't sleep that night, not really. I laid on the couch in Lucas's guest room, staring up at the ceiling, my body still, but my mind refusing to rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Meredith's voice again, that casual cruelty, that apathy. It haunted me like an echo that wouldn't fade. Outside, the wind rustled the trees gently. It should have been calming. But inside me, the storm hadn't passed. I had stepped away from her, yes. I had chosen myself for the first time in years. But what did that even mean? How do you rebuild something when your foundation was never real to begin with? Lucas had gone to bed hours earlier. He didn't pry, didn't ask questions. He just handed me a blanket, clapped a hand on my shoulder and said, "You're safe here." That's all that matters tonight. It did matter, more than I realized. Around 3 a.m., I finally got up and walked outside. The Texas sky above me was endless, littered with stars. The porch creaked under my feet as I stepped down into the yard. I needed air, real air. The kind that fills your lungs and reminds you you're still alive, even if you don't feel like it. I stood there barefoot in the cool grass, arms crossed, staring at the horizon like it held answers. I hadn't cried. Not since that first night. Maybe I was too exhausted. Or maybe I had cried so much in silence that I no longer had tears left to give. Then I heard the door behind me open. Lucas. He joined me silently, standing a few feet away. We didn't talk right away. He looked up at the sky with me. The silence between brothers, sometimes it speaks louder than anything else. "You remember when Dad left Mom?" he asked after a while. I blinked. "Yeah, I was 13. You were what? 10? He nodded. He said he couldn't be what she needed anymore. I remember thinking he was a coward. I stayed quiet. But now I think, he continued, maybe he just realized he'd been lying to himself for too long, staying in something because it was comfortable, because it was safe, but it wasn't right. I turned toward him slowly. "You think that's me now?" "I think you're doing what most men are too afraid to do," he said. "Walking away before the lie becomes your whole life." I looked back up at the stars. They didn't blink or waver, they just were constant, distant, unmoved by our chaos. "I just thought love meant staying, no matter what," I whispered. Lucas shook his head. "Nah, man, that's what we're told, but love isn't martyrdom. It's not supposed to hollow you out. It's supposed to build you, make you more of yourself. If it makes you feel smaller, if it makes you feel invisible, it's not love, it's obligation." His words landed with the weight of a confession I hadn't made yet. Because deep down I had known, maybe not in the beginning, but certainly in the last few years, I had felt myself becoming invisible in my own marriage. "You're not broken," Lucas said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You just got lost, trying to love someone who didn't know how to love you back." I exhaled. I don't even know who I am anymore. That's okay, he said. That's where you start. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself believe it might be true. 2 days after my sleepless night under the Texas stars, I found myself drifting farther from anything I used to know. Lucas had offered to let me stay as long as I needed, but something inside me, restless, unsettled, pushed me to move again. So I packed up the duffel bag, now a permanent part of my shadow, and hit the road with no map, no plan. I ended up in a small town in New Mexico. It was the kind of place people pass through without stopping. One gas station, one grocery store, and a dusty main street with storefronts that hadn't seen renovations since the 80s. But something about it made me slow down. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the fact that no one knew me here. I could disappear into the anonymity like a ghost who never had a home. I checked into a roadside motel with a flickering neon sign that read, Desert Rose Inn. The room smelled like pine cleaner and old curtains, but it had a bed, a window, and the blessed absence of memory. That night, I didn't dream. For the first time in weeks, my mind didn't replay Meredith's voice, it just rested. The next morning, I wandered into the town's only diner, Margie's place. It was half empty, filled with locals who all looked up briefly before returning to their conversations. The woman behind the counter was maybe in her 60s, with silver hair pulled into a bun and eyes that had seen too much but judged nothing. She gave me a nod and a soft, "Sit anywhere you like, honey." I sat by the window, watching the wind blow through the empty street, and ordered coffee. When she brought it over, she asked, "You just passing through?" I nodded. "Just moving." "Moving's good," she said. "Means you're not stuck. Lot of people get stuck in places they don't belong." Her words caught me off guard. She couldn't have known how much that sentence punched me in the gut. I smiled faintly. "You ever been stuck?" She laughed. "Oh, honey, for 30 years I was stuck with a man who treated me like wallpaper, barely noticed unless I was out of place." I blinked. "What did you do?" "Got tired of being invisible," she said simply. "Packed a bag, just like you, and kept driving until the road told me to stop." "Did you regret it?" She poured me more coffee, then met my eyes. "Never. Only regret was not leaving sooner." I didn't speak for a moment. I sipped the hot coffee slowly, letting her words sit with me. There was something comforting about her presence, not just her kindness, but her strength. The quiet, battle-scarred kind that doesn't brag, just endures. She walked away to tend to another table, but before she left, she said, "Whatever you're running from, just make sure you don't outrun yourself." That line followed me all day. I walked through the town, past the rusted playground and the one-screen movie theater with peeling posters. I watched kids ride bikes past cracked sidewalks. A dog barked at me from a front porch. Life was simple here, slower maybe, but real. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was drowning in someone else's mess. For the first time, I felt like maybe I could start something that was mine. That night, I sat on the motel bed, the lamp flickering above me, and opened my journal. I hadn't written since before everything shattered, but the words came like a flood. Not about Meredith, not about what I lost, but about who I might become. I wrote for an hour. I wrote about building something from scratch. I wrote about finding meaning in silence, purpose in wandering, dignity in letting go. I wrote like a man who finally believed that his story didn't end when his marriage did. That, in fact, maybe that's where it really began. The next morning I went back to Margie's. She smiled when she saw me. "Back so soon?" she asked. I smiled back. "Yeah, figured I'd stay a while." She poured my coffee without another word, and just like that I wasn't just passing through anymore. 2 weeks passed in the quiet town of Estrella, New Mexico. It was the longest I had stayed anywhere since walking out of my marriage. I woke with the sun, walked the silent back roads, ate pancakes at Margie's, and wrote in my journal every night, until my hand cramped and my heart felt less like a gaping wound and more like a healing scar. But healing, I was learning, wasn't linear. Some days were good. I would sit on the bench outside the diner, sipping coffee, watching kids play with dogs, and feel something like peace. Other days, the memories would hit me like waves, unexpected and cruel. I'd hear a laugh that reminded me of Meredith's, or smell vanilla candles like the ones she used to light, and it would knock the wind out of me. I would sit in the car, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles, trying to remember who I was before I became a man who was tolerated instead of loved. One night, I sat in the motel room with the TV buzzing softly in the background and opened my notebook. I had written pages of thoughts, reflections, pieces of a man slowly rebuilding, but that night something pushed me to write differently. I began to write a letter to Meredith, not one I would ever send, but one I needed to write. Dear Meredith, I'm not writing this so you'll feel guilty. I'm not writing this to win you back. I'm writing because there are words that were never spoken, and now that there's nothing left to protect, I think I finally deserve to speak them. I loved you. For 10 years, I loved you with a kind of loyalty that went deeper than convenience. I didn't just love who you were. I loved who I became when I was with you. I believed in us even when the days got hard. I believed love meant holding on. I never imagined that the one person I trusted most would be the one I needed to let go of in order to survive. I heard you that night, when you thought I wasn't there, when you said you couldn't stand me anymore, when you called me predictable, dull, suffocating. Those words echoed inside me like gunshots in a canyon, and not because they were cruel, but because they were true, to you. And you didn't say them in anger. You said them like a fact, like a diagnosis. And the worst part? You were calm when you said it. I realized something then. Love doesn't die in explosions. It dies in silence, in sighs, in the way someone stops looking at you like you matter. It dies slowly, and I missed every single sign. You were gone long before I walked out that door. But I stayed. Because I thought love was supposed to stay. You let me stay. You let me believe we were still a team, while you were already packing up emotionally. I wasn't perfect. God knows I wasn't. But I deserved honesty. I deserved a chance to grieve what we were instead of discovering it had died long ago without my permission. So I left, not to hurt you, not to punish you, but because I couldn't live another day being invisible to the person I loved most. And in these past few weeks, I've started to see something I never saw before. You weren't the only reason I stayed stuck. I was too. I thought I needed you to be whole. But now I'm learning to breathe without you. I'm learning that peace doesn't come from being needed. It comes from knowing your worth. And I'm finally starting to see mine. So thank you. Not for breaking me, but for setting me free. Tobias. I closed the notebook. Tears on my cheeks I hadn't realized were falling, but they weren't bitter, they were release. In writing that letter, I let go of the version of me that begged to be seen. I laid him to rest like an old skin I no longer needed. I walked outside. The stars were scattered across the sky like confessions. The night air smelled like dry earth and sage. I felt small, but not empty. I felt new. And for the first time, I whispered the words aloud. I'm okay. Life doesn't always offer closure wrapped in neat little bows. Sometimes all you get is a quiet room, a still heart, and the choice to not look back. I didn't walk away from Meredith to punish her. I walked away to reclaim the pieces of myself I had long abandoned. This wasn't about revenge, it wasn't even about pain anymore. It was about freedom, the freedom to heal, to rediscover joy, and to stop shrinking myself for the comfort of someone else. I didn't know where the road would lead next, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to walk it alone,